Okay, I've been advised that we are recording. So good afternoon, Mark Scheifmeyer again, the city hearing examiner. I've been asked to convene the second of two hearings scheduled for this afternoon. This is an application by the owners, Babbage Bailey Netshed LLC, seeking approval of two variances. One is a general variance from a front porch setback. The other is a shoreline variance relating to building height, all relating to property located at 2913 Harborview Drive in the city. It bears the city's hearing numbers PLVAR 21-3 and PLSVAR 21-1. In advance of today's hearing, I have received the staff report authorized by Mr. Hammer. I have also received the associated materials, including the design review board's recommendations, all other associated documents that are connected to this application. I have reviewed all of them in their entirety prior to today's hearing. So again, this is for purpose of a requested variance. It's on a somewhat different standard than, well, not that much greatly different than the last hearing. It's an application by which the petitioner, the applicant, bears the burden of proving that the requested variances should be approved. So similar process of hearing first from the city, followed then by the applicant's response. And so let's get us underway. All who testify will do so under oath. We'll begin with city staff and Mr. Hammer. Mr. Hammer, would you do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Examiner, and good afternoon, everyone. We're here for the hearing examiner's decision on the Babbage Bailey single-family residence variance requests, which are encompassed in PLVAR 21-0003 and PLSVAR 21-0001. Subject parcels located at 2913 Harborview Drive and owned by Babbage Bailey Netshed LLC. The applicant on the project is Carl Halson. The variance requests include a general variance to reduce the front porch setback and a shoreline variance to allow an increased maximum height. The variance requests have been made for the purpose of constructing a single-family residence and attached accessory apartment on a 0.14 acre lot, which is shown on the site plan, which has been provided as Exhibit A. The applicant has prepared statements of justification in support of the general variance and shoreline variance requests, and those are included as Exhibits C and D, respectively, to the staff report. The subject site is located within the WC commercial, waterfront commercial zoning district, as well as height restriction area and historic district. And it's worth noting that the single family residence and accessory apartment are both permitted outright in that zoning district. The neighboring lots to the northwest and southeast are also zoned waterfront commercial, and the remaining sides, so opposite Harborview Drive to the southwest is RB1 residential business zoning, and the northeast is Gig Harbor Bay. The site has a shoreline master program designation of city waterfront, and presently there is an existing net shed and existing garage on the site. All proper noticing was provided for the notices of application and the notice of public hearing. Staff received 4 comments for the notice of application. Those comments are included as exhibits H through K to the staff report, which I'll now summarize. Exhibit H was received by a neighboring property owner expressing support for the variance requests. Exhibit I, provided by the Puyallup tribe, it notes that the site is in an area with an extremely high probability for impacting cultural resources of the highest sensitivity, and they recommend a cultural resource monitor on site during any ground disturbance. Exhibit J was provided by the Department of Ecology and included comments regarding solid waste management, toxics cleanup, and water quality. And lastly, Exhibit K is a comment from the Squaxin Island Tribe of Indians stating the Squaxin tribe would concur with recommendations from the Department of Ecology and Historic Preservation should any recommendations be provided to the city. And we have not received any recommendations by the Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation. The city received no comments in response to the notice of public hearing prior to this public hearing. Staff has reviewed the proposed variance requests for consistency with all relevant provisions of the City of Gig Harbor's municipal code, comprehensive plan, and shoreline master program. This analysis is detailed in section 8 of the staff report, which I will now summarize. The general variance is being requested to construct a raised walkway to provide pedestrian access from the front door of the home to the public right-of-way along Harborview Drive. And that's shown in the elevations provided in Exhibit B. Particularly the northwest elevation shows that raised walkway and the distance from the property line. So the applicant proposes to reduce the minimum porch setback from 12 feet as listed in chapter 1799-320 of the Gig Harbor Municipal Code. They're proposing to reduce that to 4 feet. The applicant has stated in their written statement that the steep rise in grade from the buildable portion of the lot to street level necessitates that pedestrian access to the new home from the public sidewalk contain a structure that is located within the front setback. Pedestrian access in this manner for single-family residential uses is not required by the Gig Harbor Municipal Code. Only in the case of non-residential would that be a requirement, and that's in the design manual, Gig Harbor Municipal Code 1799-260, which is specifically a non-residential section. Additionally, though not from the front door of the proposed residence, a connection is provided between the home and the public right-of-way on the southeast side of the home by a walkway and at-grade stairs that can be seen on the site plan, Exhibit A. Granting of the variance would be considered a special privilege, as other properties within the waterfront commercial zoning district would be required to provide a 12-foot porch setback, and granting a reduction of that would be a right granted to one, but not others. So based on the submitted items provided, it appears that there are design options available that could provide for a reasonable use of the land without the need for a setback variance. The shoreline variance has been proposed to increase the maximum building height from 18 feet to 23 feet 6 inches. So an addition of 5 feet 6 inches. This height requirement is noted in the Shoreline Master Program Bulk and Dimensional Standards, section 7.1.2. The proposed structure includes a lower ADU level, a main level, and a loft level above that. The exterior of the existing garage is proposed to be changed to match the design of the proposed home, and that's per the recommendation of the Design Review Board. That's found in the attachment E, which is the notice of recommendation from the Design Review Board. As part of the written statement for the shoreline variance provided as Exhibit D, the applicant has noted under the first review criteria that the bulk and dimensional standards significantly interfere with the ability to develop the subject site with a reasonably sized home commensurate with the extremely high property value of the property. While that criteria to be demonstrated reads that the strict application of the standards set forth in the Shoreline Master Program preclude or interfere with reasonable use of the property, it does not note that the reasonable use must also be commensurate with the land value of the site. So the city would not have a code requirement to consider land value or the relation of the proposed structure to that land value when reviewing a variance request. The applicant has noted the non-conforming heights of both the existing garage on the site and structures on adjacent sites. However, the Shoreline Master Program section 8.11.1, which is a section that covers non-conforming uses and structures, notes that nonconformities shall not be enlarged upon, expanded, extended, or used as grounds for adding other structures or uses prohibited elsewhere in the same shoreline environment designation. The applicant has noted a sharp slope at the front of the parcel, which slopes steeply down from the right of way. Portions of that slope are located outside the building area and would not affect the maximum allowable height on the site in any negative way. So based on the submitted items provided, it appears that there are design options available that could provide for a reasonable use of the land without the need for a shoreline variance. Considering this analysis, staff concludes that the circumstances codified in Gig Harbor Municipal Code 1766-030 and written in Shoreline Master Program Section 8.2 do not exist on the subject site and do not support the proposed variances. This concludes my brief of the project, and I am happy to answer any questions.
I have several, Mr. Hammer, and I'll express some ignorance here. I have looked at these plans as closely as I can, and I don't see what the first variance is. What am I missing on these plans that tells me the 4 foot versus 12 foot? Can you bring it up and show me what I am not seeing?
Mm-hmm. Let me share my screen. Okay, is that visible now?
Yes.
Okay, so it would be in this northwest elevation. As you can see right here, there's a raised walkway.
Can you? Well, yes, I noticed that, and I understand it's the walkway to the front door. Mm-hmm. I got all that. What I don't get is the setback issue.
Okay, so the porch setback would be similar to any other building setback. It's not listed on here, and I apologize for not demonstrating it on the plans. So that figure was scaled out. So this
okay,
garage
so
here,
at least I feel better that
yeah, so the 2 feet 6 is the distance from the garage. Actually, that would be it's not well marked on here.
So that's the roof overhang.
Correct.
When it speaks to setback and porch, mm-hmm. and obviously there isn't a porch. So what is the reference? What is the starting line? And it's measured from right of way. I understand that. Yeah. So from the right of way, it is measuring 4 feet to, is it the garage face?
So the 4 feet would be to
the edge of the
portion of the walkway that is no longer at grade. So where it effectively becomes a structure.
Okay, so the measured distance is roughly 1 foot past the face of the house.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
Or the existing garage, excuse me.
Okay, and so am I to understand the city's position is that the existing garage should be relocated?
No.
8 feet?
No. The existing garage is.
What am I? That's where I'm getting confused.
Okay.
What is it that the applicant wants that the city resists?
So the applicant wants to build the raised walkway within the porch setback area. There is an existing non-conforming garage there that is being utilized as part of this project, primarily renovated on the outside to match the existing. So raised walkways are not a structure which would be normally allowed within the setback area. The code allows for them to extend up to 18 inches into a setback. And I think I believe I provided the definition of yard, which would include all elements which are allowed to extend into a setback. If not, I apologize, and I can read that over again.
Well, I'd like to think of myself as an intelligent guy, and can read a set of plans reasonably well. I've got to be open about this. I'm still as unclear as to what this issue is as I began with. I now at least understand it's referencing the walkway that leads to the door, and its measured distance, and that as currently proposed, that's 4 feet where it should be 12 feet.
Correct.
Where I get lost, I guess, is if not granted, how would the applicant gain access to their door? What is it that I'm missing?
So I suppose in order to gain access to the door, I don't know if a stairway would be feasible or a different design for the location of the front door.
Okay. Let's focus on this issue first before going to the height issue. So
Absolutely.
the DRB and in classic DRB language seems to support the variance, but in couched in language that doesn't really make that terribly clear. And so if I'm reading their recommendations correctly, they find no objection to this variance, or am I misreading their recommendations?
So they were looking at a design alternative to a design requirement that requires garages to be located, basically de-emphasized. The section is de-emphasized residential garages. So within that section, there's a list of criteria. An applicant would need to meet one of those criteria. So in this case, the garage is at the property line. And so the applicant was seeking relief from the provision of the requirement to de-emphasize garages. And so the design review board recommended that they change the siding, windows, paint, roofing of that existing garage to match the proposed home behind it. And so they accepted that as an alternative that was equivalent or greater to what existed on the site previously, or what the design guideline or requirement was.
And you said it better than I did as to what they decided, but I guess the conclusion to be drawn from what they recommended is that based upon that, they would support the variance, or are they even responding to the variance?
They were not responding to the variance or reviewing the variance.
Okay, well, then that's, I guess I misunderstood the purpose of their report. I thought it was tied to that, and hence my confusion. So they are not speaking, they take no position relative to the variance then?
No, they do not.
Okay. Okay, I've dealt with lots of variances. I haven't dealt with one quite of this nature. It's an outlier, and I'm struggling with comprehending it. I'm trying to better understand the city's purposes for the regulation, and hence whether those purposes are in conflict with the request or not. So let's try it from that direction, Mr. Hammer.
Yeah.
What would you say the purposes for these regulations, for this particular regulation is?
The porch setback
Yes.
itself. So the purpose of that is it kind of goes hand in hand with our design manual in promoting having the front door be a prominent feature of the home. So I think in general, they want front porches. So you would have, for instance, a front porch extends out beyond the front door, somewhere people sit, something like that. So that setback is sort of used as an incentive to provide that sort of design. And it's also kind of a design that's seen in the historic district around Gig Harbor, more of a historic look than I think what you typically see with newer homes.
And bear with me as I ask what seems like the same question, and probably is more than once, as I try to get through the fog that I'm finding myself in. If, for example, they were to extend fill along the front side of their, what would be the westerly side of their property to reduce the length of that walkway, would that then decrease the length or increase the distance, the setback, if in fact it was filled as opposed to a walkway at that point?
Yeah, so if the walkway was at grade, it would be allowed within the setback area. It's just that it's raised up and considered a structure. That would, so give me a moment, I'll pull up the definition. The definition of yard means a required open space that is on the same lot with the principal use and is unoccupied or unobstructed by any portion of the structure except roof eaves, bump out windows, fireplace chimneys, and decks, balconies. And decks, balconies may extend up to 18 inches into the yard. In addition, paved terraces, fences, walls, retaining walls, rockeries, at-grade stairs, poles, posts, ornaments, furniture, and other customary yard accessories may be permitted in any yard subject to height limitations and requirements limiting obstruction of visibility at intersections. So that definition effectively outlines what we would and wouldn't allow within setback areas.
Okay. As to the height variance, I'm not sure that I have any, I understand the nature of the request and I understand the city's response much better than I did this first one. So I don't think I have any additional questions for you, Mr. Hammer.
Okay.
Would your testimony conclude the city's presentation?
Yes.
Okay, we'll turn then to the applicant. And Mr. Hammer, who is that? Would that be through Mr. Halson, or who do you anticipate?
Yes, Mr. Halson.
Okay, so Mr. Halson, you've been unmuted. I'll have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I can't start my video. Somebody's at the city's blocking my video.
Well, let's get to that in a second, but just to have you sworn first, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Okay, let's attend now to your materials. And so, Mr. Hammer, can we address the technical issues?
It's done.
Okay,
Has been
great.
added.
All right. So go ahead, Mr. Olson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Examiner. Carl Halson for the applicant. My name and address are part of the record. I want to respond to some of the things from the staff report first before I get into my brief testimony. Just a few items where the variance for the height is described as we're asking for 23 feet 6 instead of 18. While that is actually true, I just want to put that in context for the examiner. If you, or as you're reviewing Exhibit B, the the southeast and the northwest elevations, and you look at that heavy black line that's across the screen, which is the maximum height, you can see with the house itself, which is the addition, it's just two small portions of the peaks of the house that exceed that. It's not the whole thing. Just wanted to make sure that was clarified. With regard to the structure itself, I just want to give a little bit of context for that. When the structure was built, we don't actually know when it was. It was very old, could be the 30s, or maybe in the 50s. I'm not sure, but from the assessor's records, they're estimating 59. At any rate, this garage that exists on site was a part of the lot to the north where the single family home is located, the white single family home. That was one piece of property, which is why once it was split off and they put the garage on one piece and the house on the other piece, it now looks and functions pretty funky. That was a family that had that property, and they had a couple of heirs. They had to divide it up. So one got the garage, one got the house, and they both split the dock. That's how we got to the situation we're at today. Going down through the staff report. Oh, just a little bit of discussion about the reasonableness argument I made. I've been doing this business. This is my 35th year of being a planner. And this is pretty common to make arguments in variance cases of reasonable, depends on the value of the property. And I'm not an attorney, so I don't have case law for you, Mr. Examiner, on this. But I've been in lots of hearings over those 30 years and seen arguments made and hearing examiner decisions made on what's reasonable on a $100,000 piece of property is not reasonable on $1 million piece of property. That's the concept of the reasonableness, depends on the value of the property. I made a note on page 10 of the staff report. Just in regard to the other properties within the neighborhood, I don't disagree with Mr. Hammer that they also would be subject to the height restriction of 18 feet, but that's not what the criteria is saying to me. It says that the variance will not constitute a grant of special privilege not enjoyed by other properties. It doesn't say enjoyed by other properties if they were built under today's code. Well, the property next door, what we call the boat barn, and if the examiner's been to the property or when you go, you're going to see a 50-foot tall structure that hangs out over the water's edge. It's quite a large structure, far exceeds the height limit and exceeds a lot of other things as well. And that's already enjoyed by one of the property's neighbors. I think that's it for my comments on the staff report. I just appreciate Mr. Hammer's work on that and his conclusion on the bottom of page 10 that he agrees that granting of this variance will not be material or detrimental to the city or to the neighborhood. In terms of my presentation, I will be quick. I was going to go through my findings, but you've got those in writing, Mr. Hammer. I won't waste your time reading to you. We've got the two variances, the front yard variance and then the height variance. The front yard variance is for what I call the inviting and pedestrian oriented front entry to the new home. And if you look at the, I don't know if it's in the record or not, it's the south elevation. I see the southeast, the northwest, and the north elevation, but the south elevation, it looks straight on at the property from the street, and it shows the 3 existing garage doors, and then to the left is the proposed new front door of the structure. And the variance, as I think we've figured out in all the discussions now, it's so you can get to that front door. And then the height variance speaks for itself. Prior to the adoption of the current shoreline regulations in 2013, Gig Harbor allowed any structure to be located at the water's edge. It was one of the few jurisdictions I work in that had no setback or buffer from the water. Now, when the examiner tours the immediate neighborhood, if you haven't already, you're going to see other homes. It's obvious that most of those homes are built very close to the water, if not right on top of the bulkhead. After 2013, any new structure had to be 35 feet from the water. That's 25 feet for a vegetation conservation strip plus a 10-foot setback from that buffer. So these new regulations fundamentally, I call them new because I've been in business a long time. They're not that new now. The new regulations fundamentally changed how new development would look like going forward Gig Harbor. As a result, our team, including the architect who's on this call and so are the property owners, we're trying to thread the needle between fitting in with the neighborhood and complying with the most recent development regulations. As to the former, only one comment was received from a neighboring property owner who fully supports the project. As to the latter, the project is fully compliant with the zoning code, shoreline regulations, and design manual, save for the 2 minor variance requested before you today. It was considered by the design review board, as was discussed a little bit before, and received their full support, and the variances were not before them. But I will tell you, in my experience with Gig Harbor's design boards, I guess over the years since we've had them in 95, they look at projects holistically. They have a very hard time restricting themselves to looking at only what's before them. I see Jeremy smiling at that too. So they look at projects holistically, even though the project holistically isn't before them, and they did unanimously support the project. Specifically with regard to that front, the variance to get to the front door, I just want to highlight a few things, and I think I've already said one of them, which is to have a prominent front door, you got to get there. 1799-490B of the design manual specifically says the front door must be oriented so that it directly faces the street. 1799-510 says in part that historic homes are also characterized by front porches placed near the street, and 1799-520B simply says emphasize front entry. We think that those portions of the code are certainly telling me and telling us that you want to have a front door aimed at the street if you can, and we can here, but we've got to be able to walk to that on the side of this existing garage, and that necessitates a little bit of an elevated walkway. With regard to the height variance, again, citing from a portion of the design code, 1799-020A, it encourages buildings that complement the existing character of the neighborhood, that relate visually and physically to surrounding development, and that promote pedestrian usage. And finally, 1799-510D and 520B requires that new structures respect the scale of adjacent structures. And again, I'd reference you to the boat barn next door. If you're not aware of it, Mr. Examiner, across the street and upland from this proposed home is a city-owned forested park. A fully compliant home that didn't need variances of equal size could be developed on this site, but would need to be closer to the water. If you can see on the site plan, which I think is your Exhibit A, and if you're not looking at Exhibit A, I'll describe it as best I can. There's a heavy black line that is the 10-foot setback from the vegetation conservation strip, and then there's space between that and where our proposed structure is. We could, flip this home and then slide it down into that area and probably get the same square footage and probably dive under the height limit. Or we could bury the back end of the home a little bit to try and get under the height limit. But if it's redesigned and flipped, is it better to do that, or is it better to keep it farther away from the water? It seems to me the newest regulation the city has is the shoreline regulations adopted in 2013, and it's given the choice. It seems like it's better to push this house farther away from the water and respect that front buffer area to the degree it can. Just ask you again to review my findings. I do also request that you either walk that street or drive that street and continue on past the proposed site, look at the existing homes as you head up towards the old ferry landing, and then imagine how this house would fit in with the neighborhood, and also consider if a fully compliant structure would actually be a better fit. I don't think you would conclude that it would not. The proposal before you today, approved by the DRB, supported by the neighborhood, and furthers the development regulations as I discussed, I think it is better than the alternatives where we could do the same project. And that's it for me. I think maybe our architect would like to testify, unless you have any questions, Mr. Examiner.
I do not, Mr. Holston. Thank you. And I do believe you said that concludes your presentation.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So we'll turn then, this being a public hearing, we'll turn then to hear any public testimony if there is any. Mr. Hammer, do you have an indication as to there being any members of the public present wishing to testify?
It appears there could be. I just ask that if anybody in the attendees would like to comment, that they raise their hand so we can call on you and let you speak.
I see Mr. Freeman having raised his hand. And so I'll turn then to Mr. Freeman. Apart from Mr. Freeman, Mr. Hammer, did you receive any other responses?
We did not.
Okay, so Mr. Freeman, you are unmuted. You have heard the testimony, the presentation both by the city and the applicant. Have you sworn? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
I sense that there's this confusion as to where that front door wants to really be. And can it be, for example, over the top of a structure? Right now, we've got a walkway extending from the street to the front door. And I don't know if this can be seen or not. This is just a suggestion. I don't know if this is going to help or hurt anything. It's not working. Anyway, if, example, that entire lower floor were actually extended out underneath of what would be the walkway today, as proposed. Now it's structure. It's part of the house. And above it, a longer entry hallway, if you will, and a roof structure. That proposes to put the front door right up, 4 feet back from the property line. Takes away all of the confusion.
Sometimes I'll paraphrase testimony that will track whether I've done well or not. You're suggesting that rather than grant the variance, that the design be redone to move the door forward and to change the underlying structure as well. Did I summarize your testimony correctly?
That portion of it you correctly summarized. Now I'm going to add one more caveat here. If you decide that you can support what we've presented as it's presented, then this becomes moot.
Okay, so you're
love
saying,
to have you support this. Yeah.
Okay, all right. You're saying as an alternative, should I deny the variance, that might be a considered alternative at that point.
That would be a fair assumption. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. Anything else that you wanted to speak to? Okay.
Just a comment that the older structure as a garage, as a part of this project, would be reconfigured in such a manner that it would no longer be or act as a garage. I'm not sure that that has an effect, except for the fact that the garage, according to the design manual, wants to always be to the side of the house or behind it. But if in fact this isn't even going to be a garage, it takes it off the table. I hope I haven't confused things enough that I probably have.
Well, it has mildly, and I'm not sure that it's directly on point. So rather than get further confused, I'm probably going to give that some limited importance. But.
Okay, that's great. That's concludes my comments.
Okay, thank you. Well, then let's complete our circle. Having heard both from the applicant and as well as the public, Mr. Hammer, you've heard their testimony, which the city have additional response.
I think the only response would be that I think the city would be concerned about establishing precedent by the granting of variances that or any variance approval that didn't also require reasonable use of the land. So if it's going beyond that, so.
Okay, thank you. And then one last opportunity for comment, Mr. Halson, anything you wish to say in response?
Couple things. I want to make it clear that Mr. Freeman is our architect for the project. He was referred to as member of the public, but he is our architect. And then secondly, to what Mr. Hammer just said, as I understand it, variances aren't precedent setting. Each variance has to stand alone on its own, case by case basis. Variances don't set precedents. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to take this under advisement, and I'm going to decide whether I visit the site. I have not physically visited the site. I have remotely visited the site. I've made as half a dozen inspections of the site via Google aerial mapping. I've looked at it from all directions from its mapping sources, which are quite good. I have to decide if those are good enough to get this perspective, because these are unique issues in a unique neighborhood. I generally don't have difficulty with variances. They're usually straightforward. I don't find struggle with them. I'm sort of annoyed with myself that I'm struggling with this one quite as much as I am, just in terms of coming to grips with it and therefore reaching a decision. So I'm going to take this under advisement. I will let the parties know whether I'm going to undertake the independent site inspection or not. I don't wish anybody to be present with me if I do so. That is strictly for my purpose. I'll let you know if I have done so or if I've simply proceeded based upon the adequacy of other site materials available to me. And then I'll render, once I've made that decision, I'll then promptly render my final decision. Are there any questions about that?
No questions from me.
I'm getting frozen screen, so I'm not sure if I'm getting any responses or not.
No, from me.
Let me ask.
No, for me.
No from me.
Okay, good. Yeah, and I do apologize that we're breaking up a bit today. But despite those events, I've gotten a clear understanding of all testimony. So again, I'll go ahead and do that as quickly as I can. I'll let the parties know what I am up to, and then I'll proceed accordingly. With that, I think we're adjourned. Thank you.